Black boy saves pregnant woman, not knowing she's a millionaire's wife. The next day, his life changes. In the heart of a bustling city, Marcus, a young black boy from a humble background, lives a life filled with quiet determination and unspoken dreams. One ordinary day, his path crosses with Eleanor, a pregnant woman in desperate need of help. Without hesitation, Marcus risks everything to save her, unaware that this single act of courage will set off a chain reaction that alters his destiny forever. The next day, an unexpected offer arrives at Marcus's doorstep, one that promises luxury, opportunity, and a world beyond his wildest imagination. But as Marcus steps into this new reality, he begins to uncover secrets that hint at a far greater challenge ahead. A mysterious phrase whispered by Eleanor, a strange object left behind, and a powerful man watching his every move, all point to a truth that could change everything. What happens when kindness leads to danger, when generosity hides ulterior motives, and when one boy must decide between wealth and integrity? Stay tuned to find out how Marcus navigates this life-altering journey. This is another beautiful story from Living Narratives, where you truly feel the emotion of tales that make you reflect on life. Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where you're watching this video from. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and join us on this emotional journey. Marcus sat on the edge of his worn-out bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of the small room he shared with his mother. The faint sound of a neighbor's radio drifted through the thin walls, but it barely registered in his mind. His fingers traced the edges of an old photograph he had found earlier. That day, tucked inside a dusty shoebox under his mother's bed, it was a picture of his father, a man he barely remembered, but whose absence had shaped so much of his life. "Who were you?" Marcus whispered to himself, though the question felt hollow. He knew fragments of the story his father had left when Marcus was just 5 years old, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a void that no amount of effort could fill. Still, something about holding this faded image made him feel closer to understanding, or at least imagining, what kind of man his father might have been. His thoughts drifted as he set the photo down beside him, its corners frayed from years of neglect. Marcus often wondered if his father ever thought about them, if he regretted walking away from a wife and child who needed him. More importantly, Marcus questioned whether his own choices would mirror those of the man in the photograph. Would he too abandon those who depended on him, or would he rise above the circumstances that seemed determined to hold him back? These weren't idle musings. They weighed heavily on him every day. His mother, now elderly and frail, relied on him for everything, from grocery runs to fixing the leaky faucet in their tiny kitchen. She worked tirelessly cleaning houses for wealthier families, her hands calloused and her body bent by decades of labor. Yet she never complained, always insisting that Marcus focus on his future rather than dwelling on their present struggles. Her resilience inspired him, even as it underscored the harsh realities they faced daily. The next morning, Marcus woke early, as he always did, to help his mother prepare breakfast before heading out to find work. Today's task involved helping a local carpenter unload lumber from a truck parked near the market square. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid enough to keep food on the table and occasionally buy supplies for his sketches. Drawing was Marcus's one true escape, a way to channel his frustrations and dreams into something tangible. As he carried planks of wood across the uneven pavement, sweat dripping down his brow, he couldn't help but imagine how different his life might be if someone believed in him enough to offer a real opportunity. Not charity, but a chance to prove himself, to show the world that he was capable of more than hauling timber or sweeping floors. That thought lingered in his mind long after the job was done, fueling both his determination and his frustration. Later that afternoon, Marcus returned home and settled onto the creaky wooden bench outside their front door, sketchpad in hand. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the narrow streets of their neighborhood. He flipped open the pad, revealing half-finished drawings of buildings, faces, and landscapes that existed only in his imagination. Each line represented not just creativity, but hope, a vision of a future where he wasn't confined by the limitations of his surroundings. As he sketched, his mother joined him, sitting quietly beside him with a cup of tea cradled in her weathered hands. "You're talented, Marcus," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words carried weight, though Marcus couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Talent doesn't pay bills, Mama," he replied, his tone tinged with resignation. But deep down, he wanted to believe her, that maybe, just maybe, his art could lead him somewhere better. Their conversation shifted naturally to memories of Marcus's childhood, particularly the stories his mother used to tell him about his father. She spoke cautiously, aware of how sensitive the topic was for him. "He wasn't a bad man," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Just lost. Your father had big dreams once, but life got the better of him. He thought leaving would give us a better chance." Marcus listened intently, though skepticism clouded his expression. "If he cared so much, why didn't he stay and fight for us?" he asked, his voice rising slightly despite his attempt to remain calm. His mother sighed, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes people think running is easier than facing their problems. I don't excuse what he did, but I forgave him a long time ago. What matters now is what you choose to do with your life." Those words stayed with Marcus long after the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. Inside their modest home, lit only by the flickering glow of a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, Marcus paced back and forth, replaying the conversation in his mind. His mother's forgiveness baffled him, not because he doubted her capacity for compassion, but because he couldn't fathom letting go of the anger and disappointment that had festered within him for years. How could she forgive someone who had abandoned them without explanation or apology? And yet there was wisdom in her perspective, a quiet strength that challenged him to reconsider his own stance. Perhaps holding on to resentment was keeping him stuck, preventing him from moving forward. The realization unsettled him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and the legacy he wanted to leave behind. As the night wore on, Marcus turned his attention back to the photograph of his father, studying it intently as if searching for answers hidden within the grainy image. The man in the picture looked confident, almost carefree, with a smile that hinted at untapped potential. Was that the same person who had walked away from responsibility, or had life changed him somehow? Marcus wondered if he too carried traces of his father's traits, the ambition, the restlessness, the fear of failure. If so, which parts of himself should he embrace, and which should he reject? These questions swirled in his mind like a storm, each one pulling him deeper into introspection. By the time he finally drifted off to sleep exhausted from the mental tug-of-war, he had reached a tentative conclusion. Whatever path he chose, it had to be rooted in purpose. He refused to let his life be defined by the mistakes of the past. The following day brought new challenges, as it always did. Marcus spent hours scouring the neighborhood for odd jobs, knocking on doors and offering his services to anyone willing to hire him. Most days, he returned home empty-handed, but today luck was on his side. A shopkeeper agreed to pay him a modest sum to repaint the exterior of her store, a task that required precision and patience. As he worked, brushing strokes of fresh paint over chipped surfaces, Marcus allowed himself to dream again. What if he could use his skills not just to survive, but to create something meaningful? Maybe architecture or design, fields that combined artistry with practicality, could be his ticket to a brighter future. The idea excited him, even as doubt crept in. Who was he kidding? Opportunities like that didn't come knocking on his door. Still, the mere possibility ignited a spark within him. urging him to keep pushing forward despite the odds stacked against him. By evening, Marcus's muscles ached from the physical exertion, but his spirit felt lighter than it had in weeks. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of his room, surrounded by scattered papers and pencils, he began sketching ideas for buildings he imagined constructing someday. Towers that reached toward the clouds, homes designed with warmth and functionality in mind, community centers that brought people together, all rendered with meticulous detail. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of control over his destiny, however fragile it might be. His mother peeked in, smiling softly at the sight of her son, lost in his creative world. "You'll make something of yourself, Marcus," she said, her voice filled with unwavering belief. "I know it." Though uncertainty still loomed large, Marcus nodded, allowing himself to believe, for just a moment, that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Marcus was walking briskly through the crowded streets of the city, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of the day ahead, when he noticed a woman standing near the edge of the sidewalk, glancing nervously over her shoulder. She seemed out of place amidst the bustling crowd, her elegant coat and polished shoes contrasting sharply with the worn-out surroundings. Her eyes darted around as if searching for something or someone, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a pang of concern. "Are you lost?" he asked, approaching cautiously. The woman turned to him, startled at first, but then her expression softened slightly. I think so," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm trying to find my way back to the main square, but I feel like I'm being followed." Marcus frowned, scanning the area quickly. He didn't see anyone suspicious, but her unease was palpable. "Come on, I'll take you." "There," he said firmly, gesturing for her to follow him. As they walked, Marcus tried to make small talk to ease the tension, though his curiosity about her situation gnawed at him. "What's your name?" he asked after a moment. "Eleanor," she replied softly, still glancing behind them every few seconds. "And you are?" Marcus introduced himself briefly, but before he could ask more questions, Eleanor interrupted him with urgency in her voice. "Listen, Marcus, I need you to do me a favor. If anything happens to me—" She stopped abruptly, shaking her head as if reconsidering what she was about to say. "Never mind, just stay alert, all right? You don't know who I am, but soon you will." Her words hung in the air between them, cryptic and unsettling. Before Marcus could press her for clarification, Eleanor suddenly froze, her eyes locking onto something or someone in the distance. Without another word, she grabbed his arm and pulled him into a narrow alleyway, urging him to keep moving. The alley was dimly lit and smelled faintly of dampness, but Marcus didn't have time to dwell on the discomfort. His heart raced as Eleanor practically dragged him along, her grip surprisingly strong, despite her delicate appearance. "Who's following you?" Marcus demanded, his protective instincts kicking in. Eleanor hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together as if debating how much to reveal. Finally, she whispered, "People who don't want me talking to strangers. Please, just trust me." Her plea struck a chord within Marcus. There was an authenticity in her fear that made it impossible to dismiss. They emerged from the alley onto a quieter street, and Eleanor finally released his arm, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," she murmured, her gratitude evident even as her gaze remained wary. "You've done enough." Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like an intricate knot. She held it up briefly, studying it with an unreadable expression before letting it slip from her fingers. It landed silently on the pavement at their feet. Marcus bent down to pick it up, confused. "Wait, you dropped this," he said, holding it out to her, but Eleanor shook her head, backing away slowly. "Keep it," she instructed, her tone firm yet gentle. "It might mean something to you later." Before Marcus could protest or ask what she meant, Eleanor turned and hurried away, disappearing into the throng of pedestrians without looking back. He stood there for a moment, staring at the necklace in his hand, its strange symbol gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Back home later that evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, turning the necklace over in his hands as he replayed the encounter in his mind. The weight of Eleanor's warning lingered heavily, her enigmatic words echoing in his thoughts. "You don't know who I am, but soon you will." What had she meant by that? Was she in some kind of a trouble? And why had she entrusted him with the necklace? These questions swirled endlessly, leaving him restless and uneasy. His mother entered the room, noticing his distracted demeanor immediately. "Something on your mind?" she asked, setting a cup of tea in front of him. Marcus hesitated, unsure whether to share the strange events of the day. Eventually, he decided to confide in her, recounting the details of his meeting with Eleanor. To his surprise, his mother listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "Be careful, Marcus," she advised gently. "Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered." Despite his mother's cautionary words, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Eleanor's plight was somehow tied to something larger than either of them realized. Over the next few days, he found himself replaying their conversation repeatedly, analyzing every nuance of her behavior and tone. There had been desperation in her voice, yes, but also a sense of purpose, as if she believed Marcus had a role to play in whatever danger she faced. The necklace became a constant presence in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the mystery surrounding Eleanor. He examined it closely, multiple times, hoping to decipher its meaning. The knot-like design was unfamiliar, its curves and lines forming a pattern that seemed almost ancient. Marcus wondered if it held symbolic significance or if it was merely decorative. Either way, it felt significant, as though it carried a message waiting to be decoded. One afternoon, while working at a local cafe to earn some extra money, Marcus overheard fragments of a conversation between two customers seated nearby. Their hushed tones caught his attention, particularly when one mentioned a woman in trouble and referenced a knot emblem. Marcus's pulse quickened as he strained to hear more without being obvious. The man continued, describing how certain individuals were searching for someone connected to a powerful organization. Though the details were vague, Marcus couldn't ignore the coincidence. Could this be related to Eleanor? He debated whether to confront the men directly, but ultimately decided against it, knowing it would raise unnecessary suspicion. Instead, he resolved to investigate further on his own, using the limited information he had gathered. The connection between the necklace and the conversation only deepened, the intrigue fueling his determination to uncover the truth. That night, unable to sleep, Marcus sat by the window, staring out at the quiet streets bathed in moonlight. His mind raced with possibilities, each one more far-fetched than the last. Was Eleanor involved in criminal activity? Or was she a victim caught in someone else's web of deceit? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but beneath the anxiety lay a spark of excitement, a sense that he was on the verge of discovering something extraordinary. For years, Marcus had felt trapped by the monotony of his life, yearning for an opportunity to prove himself. Now, unexpectedly, fate had placed him at the center of a puzzle that demanded courage and resourcefulness. He thought back to Eleanor's parting words, realizing now that they carried a dual meaning. Not only did they hint at future revelations, but they also served as a challenge, an invitation to step beyond the confines of his ordinary existence and embrace the unknown. By the following week, Marcus's obsession with the necklace and Eleanor's warning had grown to consume most of his waking hours. He scoured libraries and online forums, searching for any reference to symbols resembling the one on the pendant. Each dead end only fueled his resolve, pushing him to dig deeper. Meanwhile, his interactions with others became tinged with paranoia. He found himself scrutinizing strangers' faces and questioning their motives. Even his closest friends noticed the change in him. "You've been acting weird lately," his best friend remarked during a rare moment of downtime. "What's going on with you?" Marcus hesitated, torn between keeping his discovery private and seeking advice. In the end, he opted for a vague explanation, claiming he was simply dealing with personal issues. His friend accepted the answer, though not without a skeptical glance. As Marcus walked home alone that evening, he realized that the journey ahead would require sacrifices, not just of time and energy, but perhaps of relationships and trust. Yet the pull of the mystery remained irresistible, drawing him inexorably forward. Marcus was on his way to the market when he heard the screech of tires losing control. He turned quickly and saw a runaway car speeding toward a woman crossing the street. His heart froze for a moment as he recognized Eleanor, the same mysterious woman he had helped days earlier. Without a second thought, Marcus sprinted toward her, shouting, "Watch out!" Eleanor seemed paralyzed with fear, unable to react to the imminent danger. With a desperate leap, Marcus reached her at the last second, shoving her out of the vehicle's path. The impact was brutal. He rolled across the ground as the car whizzed past, narrowly missing him. When he finally managed to stand up, gasping for breath and with his knees scraped, Eleanor was sitting on the ground, trembling and clutching her protruding belly. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, still trying to catch his breath. She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. "You've saved more than my life today," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. The crowd began to gather around them, but Marcus barely noticed. His attention was entirely focused on Eleanor, who appeared fragile and vulnerable despite her elegant demeanor. He extended his hand to help her up, and she accepted it, still shaking. "What happened?" Marcus asked, trying to understand how the car had lost control. Eleanor shook her head, avoiding a direct answer. "It's not safe to talk about it here," she said softly, casting a cautious glance at the onlookers. Marcus frowned, realizing something bigger was at play. Before he could press further, Eleanor placed a delicate hand on his arm. "Please, Marcus, just take me somewhere safe." He hesitated for a moment, torn between wanting to know more and the need to ensure her safety. In the end, he decided to trust his instincts and led her away from the scene, guiding her to a quiet cafe nearby. As they walked, Marcus noticed that Eleanor seemed even more shaken than before. Her steps were slow and hesitant, and she frequently touched her belly as if seeking comfort. "Who are these people?" Marcus finally asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Eleanor sighed deeply, as if struggling with herself over how much to reveal. "People who don't want me alive," she replied simply, her words heavy with hidden meaning. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Does this have anything to do with what you said before, about me finding out who you are?" Eleanor looked at him, surprised that he remembered so clearly. "Yes," she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "But I can't explain now. Not here." Marcus wanted to press her for more information, but something in her expression made him hold back. He could see the fear in her eyes, a fear that went beyond the recent incident. At the cafe, they found a discreet corner where they could talk without being overheard. Eleanor ordered a cup of tea but barely touched it. Instead, she stared at the table, lost in thought. Marcus watched silently, waiting for her to be ready to speak. Finally, she lifted her eyes and looked at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You need to know that what you did today was far more important than you realize," she said, her voice firm despite her fragile appearance. "I'm married to someone who is powerful, someone many people would like to see out of the way. And now, thanks to you, there's something they can't take away from me." Marcus frowned, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. Eleanor hesitated again, as if carefully choosing her next words. "You saved my child," she said simply, "and that means you've saved much more than just a life." The implications of Eleanor's words began to seep into Marcus's mind, though he still couldn't fully grasp them. "Why would anyone want to hurt you or your child?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Eleanor shook her head, as if the answer should be obvious to anyone but him. "Money, power, influence, these things corrupt people, Marcus. And when you're married to someone like Victor Langston, the entire world seems to conspire against you." The name sounded familiar to Marcus, though. He couldn't quite place where he'd heard it before. Victor Langston, he repeated, trying to piece together the puzzle. Eleanor confirmed with a nod, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and bitterness. He's one of the richest men in the country, and he's also my husband. Marcus felt the revelation hit him like a lightning bolt. He never imagined that the woman he had helped was married to someone so powerful. "So, what does this mean for me?" Marcus asked, trying to understand his role in this story. Eleanor smiled faintly, as if anticipating his confusion. "It means you'll be rewarded," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Victor doesn't overlook acts of courage, especially when they involve his family. But," she paused, carefully choosing her words, "be cautious, Marcus. Not everything is as it seems. There are forces at play that even I don't fully understand." Her words echoed in his mind, leaving him even more perplexed. "Rewarded how?" he asked, trying to get more clarity. Eleanor only shook her head. "You'll know soon. For now, know that your life is about to change in ways you never imagined." Before Marcus could ask more questions, Eleanor abruptly stood up, adjusting her coat around her body. "I need to go," she said, her expression tense. "Stay safe, Marcus, and don't trust anyone." As soon as Eleanor disappeared through the cafe door, Marcus felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over him. He knew he had just stepped into something much bigger than himself, something that could change his life forever. Still, her words continued to echo in his mind. "You've saved more than my life today." What exactly did that mean? And why had she mentioned that he should be cautious? Marcus knew there were no easy answers, but he also knew he couldn't ignore what had happened. He took out the necklace she had dropped days ago and examined it again, as if hoping to find some hidden clue in its intricate design. The knot seemed more complex than ever, like a symbol of secrets too entangled to unravel. In the days that followed, Marcus found himself constantly distracted, reliving the incident in his mind and trying to understand the role he played in this web of mysteries. He tried to research Victor Langston, but soon realized there was little publicly available information. The man was an enigmatic figure, surrounded by rumors and speculation. Marcus began to question whether saving Eleanor had been a blessing or a curse. He knew his simple, predictable life was about to be turned upside down, but he had no idea how or when it would happen. All he knew was that Eleanor had planted a seed of curiosity within him, a seed that grew with every moment he spent thinking about her and her cryptic words. The uncertainty began to consume him, but Marcus also felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this unexpected event was the opportunity he had longed for, a chance to escape the monotony of his existence and build something greater. He thought about his mother, about all the hardships she had endured raising him alone, and felt a renewed determination. If there was a chance to change his life, he would grab it with both hands and teeth, even if it meant diving head first into an unknown and potentially dangerous world. As he tucked the necklace back into his pocket, Marcus made a silent decision. He would move forward, no matter what the future held. After all, he had already proven that he was capable of facing the unexpected. The next morning, Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching absent-mindedly, when a knock at the door startled him. He exchanged a puzzled glance with his mother before rising to answer it. Standing on the other side was a tall, impeccably dressed man whose presence commanded attention. "Marcus?" the man asked, his tone polite but firm. Marcus nodded cautiously. "I'm Victor Langston," the man introduced himself, extending a hand. Marcus hesitated for a moment before shaking it, feeling out of place in his worn clothes compared to Victor's tailored suit. "May I come in?" Victor asked, glancing past Marcus into the modest home. Marcus stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. His mother appeared from the kitchen, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Mrs. Thompson, I presume, Victor said with a slight nod. Thank you for allowing me to visit. Victor wasted no time getting to the point. After exchanging pleasantries, he turned to Marcus with an intensity that made the younger man uneasy. I understand you recently saved my wife, Eleanor, Victor began, his voice measured but tinged with emotion. What you did, it's not something I can easily repay, but I'd like to try. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the suddenness of the statement. What do you mean? He asked, his voice cautious. Victor leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other as if settling in for a serious conversation. I want to sponsor your education at one of the most prestigious international schools in the world. It's an opportunity to develop skills that could change your life, and perhaps even help others like you. Marcus stared at him, his mind racing. The offer was overwhelming, almost too good to be true. Why would you do that? He asked finally, his skepticism evident. Victor smiled faintly, though there was something unreadable in his eyes. Because people who show courage deserve recognition, and because Eleanor believes in you. Marcus glanced at his mother, who was watching the exchange silently. Her expression was unreadable, but he could sense her weighing the implications of Victor's words. It's a generous offer, she said carefully, breaking the silence. But are you sure this is what you want, Marcus? Her question hung in the air, forcing him to confront the conflict brewing inside him. On one hand, the idea of attending such a school was thrilling, a chance to escape the limitations of his current life and pursue something greater. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting Victor's generosity might come with strings attached. I don't know, Marcus admitted, turning back to Victor. This feels complicated. Victor nodded, as if expecting this response. Life often is, he replied smoothly. But sometimes, taking a risk leads to extraordinary outcomes. As the conversation continued, Marcus found himself growing increasingly uneasy. There was something about Victor's demeanor, his calm and confidence, his calculated words, that felt off. It wasn't hostility or malice, but rather a sense of control that permeated everything he said. You seem hesitant, Victor observed after a pause. Is there something specific troubling you? Marcus hesitated, unsure how to articulate his concerns. Finally, he decided to address the elephant in the room. You mentioned Eleanor believes in me. Why? She barely knows me. Victor's smile widened slightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. She sees potential where others might not, and frankly, so do I. He paused, leaning forward slightly. In fact, I've heard about you before, not just from Eleanor. Your reputation precedes you, Marcus. The statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? He asked sharply, his defenses rising. Victor's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something darker beneath the surface. Let's just say I have connections in this city. People talk. They mention a young man who works hard, helps others, and dreams of something more. Someone resilient, resourceful, and trustworthy. Marcus frowned, his unease deepening. The way Victor spoke made it sound like he had been observing him for some time, which only raised more questions. Why were you paying attention to me? Marcus pressed, his voice sharper than intended. Victor chuckled softly, as if amused by the question. Because the world needs people like you, Marcus. People who aren't afraid to step up when it matters most. And now, thanks to you, my family owes you a debt we can never fully repay. The words sounded sincere, but Marcus couldn't ignore the underlying tension. Something about Victor's explanation felt incomplete, as if he were withholding key details. His mother intervened then, sensing the weight of the decision pressing down on Marcus. Think about what this could mean for your future, she urged gently. An education like that could open doors you've only dreamed of. Marcus knew she was right, but the nagging doubts refused to fade. What if accepting Victor's offer meant becoming indebted to him in ways he couldn't foresee? What if this was all part of some larger plan he didn't understand? Still, he couldn't deny the allure of the opportunity. For years, he had felt trapped by his circumstances, yearning for a way out. Now unexpectedly a path had been laid before him, one that promised freedom, growth, and possibility. He looked at his mother, searching for reassurance. She met his gaze steadily, her faith in him unwavering. "Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith," she said softly, "even if it scares you." After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally nodded, his decision made. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I'll accept your offer." Victor's smile widened, genuine this time. "Excellent choice, Marcus. You won't regret it." But as they shook hands to seal the agreement, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he had just stepped onto a chessboard without knowing the rules. The mention of his reputation lingering in Victor's words gnawed at him, raising suspicions he couldn't yet put into words. Was this truly an act of gratitude, or was there another motive driving Victor's generosity? Only time would tell, but Marcus resolved to stay vigilant. If there was one thing he had learned from Eleanor's warnings, it was that nothing in this situation was as simple as it seemed. Later that evening, after Victor had left and the house fell silent, Marcus sat alone in his room, staring at the necklace Eleanor had given him. Its intricate knot design seemed to mock him, a symbol of unanswered questions and hidden truths. He replayed the conversation with Victor in his mind, dissecting every word and gesture for hidden meaning. There was no denying the man's charisma and apparent sincerity, but Marcus couldn't ignore the subtle undertones of manipulation. Why had Victor mentioned knowing about him beforehand? Who had been talking about him, and why? These questions swirled endlessly, keeping him awake long into the night. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a spark of determination ignited within him. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it head-on. He owed it to himself and to those who believed in him to see this journey through, no matter where it led. By the following day, Marcus had convinced himself to focus on the positives. The school Victor had mentioned was renowned for its rigorous programs and global network, offering opportunities that seemed almost unimaginable. He spent hours researching it online, marveling at the stories of former students who had gone on to achieve incredible success. Each discovery fueled his excitement, pushing aside some of the lingering doubts. Still, he couldn't completely silence the voice in the back of his mind, whispering warnings. He decided to write down his thoughts, creating a mental checklist of things to watch for as he navigated this new chapter. Trust, but verify. That would be his mantra moving forward. As he tucked the notebook away, he reminded himself of Eleanor's cryptic words, "Don't trust anyone." It was advice he intended to take seriously, even as he prepared to embrace the unknown. Marcus stepped off the sleek black car that had been sent to pick him up, his eyes scanning the sprawling campus of the international school. The contrast between this place and the world he had left behind was staggering. Immaculate lawns stretched out in every direction, dotted with students, dressed in designer clothes and carrying expensive gadgets. He adjusted the strap of his worn backpack, feeling out of place despite the tailored uniform Victor had provided for him. As he made his way toward the main building, a group of students passed by, their laughter echoing loudly. One of them glanced at Marcus with a raised eyebrow, whispering something to the others that made them chuckle. Marcus clenched his jaw, reminding himself why he was here. This wasn't about fitting in. It was about proving he belonged. The first few days were a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and overwhelming expectations. Marcus quickly realized that the academic rigor was only part of the challenge. The social dynamics were far more complex than anything he had anticipated. Conversations revolved around vacations in exotic locations, family businesses, and exclusive clubs, topics he had no frame of reference for. During lunch on his third day, he found himself sitting alone at the edge of the cafeteria, picking at his food while trying to ignore the curious glances from nearby tables. "Mind if I join you?" a voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see a girl with curly auburn hair and sharp green eyes, standing beside him, holding a tray of food. Before he could respond, she slid into the seat across from him. "I'm Sophia," she said with a warm smile. "You're Marcus, right? The new guy." He nodded cautiously, unsure what to make of her friendliness. "Yeah, that's me." Sophia wasted no time breaking the ice. "So, how are you finding it here so far?" she asked, her tone casual but probing. Marcus hesitated, debating how honest to be. "It's different," he settled on, shrugging slightly. Sophia laughed, though there was an edge of understanding in her expression. "Understatement of the year," she replied. "This place can feel like another planet sometimes, especially if you didn't grow up orbiting these kinds of circles." Her words caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, leaning forward slightly. Sophia sighed, her gaze dropping to her plate. "My parents expect me to take over the family business one day. Banking, investments, all that glamorous stuff, but it's not who I am. I want to work in education reform, help kids who don't have access to opportunities like this." She gestured around the opulent cafeteria. "But try telling them that they act like I'm throwing away my future." Marcus listened intently, surprised by how much her story resonated with him. For the first time since arriving, he felt a flicker of connection. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus and Sophia grew closer, bonding over their shared sense of being. Outsiders in a world that prized conformity, Sophia introduced him to a small group of students who, like them, didn't quite fit the mold. There was Liam, whose artistic ambitions clashed with his family's military legacy. Priya, who dreamed of becoming a journalist despite her parents' insistence on law school. And Ethan, whose quiet demeanor masked a fierce determination to break free from his father's shadow. Together, they formed an unspoken alliance, supporting each other through the pressures of the elite institution. Yet even among friends, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't overt, just occasional glances or whispered conversations that stopped when he approached, but it was enough to keep him on edge. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling class, Marcus returned to his dorm room to find an envelope tucked inside his bag. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but the lack of a return address or signature made his stomach tighten. He opened it cautiously, revealing a series of documents detailing financial transactions and corporate structures. The name at the top of each page stood out starkly: Langston Enterprises. Marcus's breath hitched as he flipped through the pages, his mind racing. What was this? Why had it been left in his possession? He considered confronting someone, Sophia perhaps, but something held him back. Whoever had placed the envelope there clearly wanted him to see it, but why? And what did they expect him to do with the information? The discovery weighed heavily on Marcus as he navigated the rest of the week. He tried to focus on his studies and maintain his friendships, but the envelope lingered in the back of his mind like a ticking clock. During a study session with Sophia, she noticed his distraction. "You've been quiet today," she observed, closing her textbook. "Everything okay?" Marcus hesitated, torn between confiding in her and keeping the secret to himself. "Just adjusting, I guess," he said finally, forcing a smile. Sophia studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "If there's something bothering you, you can talk to me. You know that, right?" Her sincerity almost broke his resolve, but he shook his head. "It's nothing, really." She didn't push further, but the concern in her eyes stayed with him long after their session ended. Despite the mounting pressure, Marcus threw himself into his coursework, determined to prove his worth. His professors were demanding, often singling him out during discussions to test his knowledge. Some classmates interpreted this as favoritism, muttering under their breath about charity cases getting special treatment. Marcus ignored them, channeling his frustration into his assignments. Slowly but surely, he began to earn respect, not just from his teachers, but from peers who recognized his dedication. Still, the envelope haunted him. Each night, he would lock his door and spread the documents across his desk, searching for patterns or clues. The more he read, the clearer it became that Langston Enterprises was involved in ventures far beyond what he had imagined. Real estate, technology, pharmaceuticals, the company's reach was vast, its influence undeniable. But there were discrepancies too, hints of deals that didn't add up. Marcus knew he was treading dangerous ground, yet curiosity drove him forward. By the end of the month, Marcus had developed a routine: excel academically, connect with Sophia and their friends, and investigate the contents of the envelope in secret. The dual existence was exhausting, but it also gave him a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, even if he didn't fully understand what that something was. One evening, as he sat cross-legged on his bed, reviewing the documents, Sophia knocked on his door. "Hey, we're heading to the library. Want to come?" she asked brightly. Marcus glanced at the papers scattered around him, then back at her. "Give me a minute," he said, gathering the documents and slipping them into a hidden compartment in his desk. As they walked together, Sophia chatted animatedly about an upcoming project, but Marcus's thoughts kept drifting back to the envelope. Whatever secrets it held, he knew one thing for certain: they were connected to Eleanor, Victor, and the cryptic warnings he had received, and sooner or later, those secrets would demand answers. Marcus was sitting in the library, trying to focus on an essay for his economics class, when he heard muffled voices coming from the adjacent hallway. He immediately recognized one of them. It was Victor Langston's voice. Curious, Marcus closed his book and slowly approached the slightly open door, trying to catch what was being said. "He's progressing faster than we expected," Victor said, his voice low but clear. Another man responded, someone Marcus didn't recognize. "That's good, right? The more involved he gets, the harder it will be for him to leave." Victor's reply carried a cautious tone. "Yes, but we need to be careful. He's already started asking questions." Marcus's heart pounded at those words. Questions. He had barely mentioned his suspicions to anyone except Sophia. How did Victor know? As the voices started to fade, Marcus quickly returned to his desk, pretending to be absorbed in his studies in case someone entered the room. His mind spun with the implications of what he had just heard. It was obvious that Victor was talking about him, but what exactly did they mean by involved? And why was Victor so concerned about his questions? A knot formed in Marcus's stomach as he realized something much bigger was happening, something he didn't yet fully understand. When Sophia arrived a few minutes later, carrying a stack of books, Marcus decided to trust her. "I need to show you something," he whispered, pulling her toward a more secluded corner of the library. Sophia frowned as Marcus explained what he had overheard and showed her the documents he had found in the mysterious envelope. She flipped through the pages quickly, her eyes widening as she absorbed the information. "This is serious, Marcus," she murmured, her expression tense. "These numbers, these transactions, they don't add up. Something here smells like dirty money." Marcus nodded, relieved to finally share his concerns with someone. "I knew something was off," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what do I do now? If I confront Victor directly, he'll know I've been investigating." Sophia thought for a moment before replying, "Maybe you don't need to confront him just yet. Keep acting normal, but let's dig deeper. If we can find something solid, we can use it as leverage." In the following days, Marcus and Sophia discreetly searched the school for more information. They spent hours in the archives, examining old records and correspondence between staff and administrators. During one of these searches, they found something significant: a series of coded messages sent by Victor to members of the school board. The messages were vague, but contained cryptic references to projects and investments that matched the documents Marcus had received. "This proves he's using the school as a front," Sophia said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had always known Victor was powerful, but he had never imagined his influence could be this dark. As they analyzed the messages, Marcus noticed something even more disturbing. Several of the transactions mentioned in the documents appeared to be linked to illegal dealings, including money laundering and resource exploitation in vulnerable countries. "He's playing dirty," Marcus muttered, his anger growing with each new discovery. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, trying to calm him. "We need to be careful, Marcus. If Victor finds out we're investigating, he might retaliate, and we don't know what he's capable of." Marcus knew she was right, but the injustice of what they were uncovering consumed him. He couldn't just ignore what was happening, especially since Victor had drawn him into this world under false pretenses. Determined to get answers, Marcus arranged an opportunity to speak with Victor during the magnate's surprise visit to the school. When they were alone in the principal's office, Marcus seized the chance to question him. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the tension he felt. "Why did you choose me for this scholarship? Why so much interest in my progress?" Victor stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You have potential, Marcus. That's rare to find," he finally responded, his voice smooth but evasive. Marcus pushed further, refusing to accept such a shallow answer. "Eleanor mentioned that you knew about me before the accident. How is that possible?" Victor smiled slightly, as if impressed by Marcus's boldness. "Let's just say people like you get noticed. You've made remarkable choices in your life, and that hasn't gone unnoticed." Victor's response only frustrated Marcus further. He knew the man was hiding something, but his words were carefully chosen to avoid revealing too much. "People like me," Marcus repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What exactly does that mean?" Victor stood up, adjusting his suit as if preparing to end the conversation. "It means you have qualities that can be useful, Marcus. Qualities I'd like to see developed even further. Don't waste this opportunity." With that, he walked out of the office, leaving Marcus alone with his swirling thoughts. Those final words echoed in his mind like a veiled threat, reinforcing his suspicions that Victor had specific plans for him. Plans Marcus wasn't sure he wanted to be part of. Back at the dormitory, Marcus shared the conversation with Sophia, who listened intently before offering her analysis. "He's manipulating you, Marcus. This talk about useful qualities. He's trying to shape you for his own purposes. But what exactly that is, we still don't know." Marcus shook, his head feeling trapped in a web of secrets and lies. "I need to find out more," he said, determined. "If Victor is using this school to cover up illegal business, then there are other people involved. We need to follow the trail to the end." Sophia agreed, though her expression showed concern. "We'll keep going together, but promise me you'll be careful. If Victor senses we're getting too close, he might take action." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Sophia intensified their investigations, gathering fragments of evidence that seemed to form a bigger picture. Each new discovery heightened the tension, but also strengthened their conviction that they were on the right path. However, the deeper they dug, the clearer it became that Victor wasn't the only player in this game. There were others, powerful figures whose names appeared in the shadows of documents and coded messages. Marcus began to feel that he was about to cross a line from which there was no turning back, but even so, he knew there was no stopping now. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with the truth as his only weapon. Marcus was in the middle of a meeting with Sophia when her phone buzzed, displaying an encrypted message she had set up to monitor certain contacts related to their investigation. "This is new," she muttered, her fingers flying across the screen as she decrypted the code. Marcus leaned in to see, but before he could ask what it meant, Sophia's face went pale. "It's an alert," she said, her voice tense. "Someone is trying to access the school's records again. They're deleting files." Marcus felt his chest tighten. If they're cleaning up the evidence, it means they know we're getting close. Sophia nodded, but her gaze was resolute. "We need to act fast. If we lose this data, we'll never be able to prove anything." Without hesitation, Marcus suggested something risky: infiltrating Victor's mansion. It was where everything seemed to converge: the illegal businesses, the coded messages, and now, possibly, the evidence they needed. Sophia hesitated, worried about the danger, but eventually agreed. "If we go, we have to be careful. Victor doesn't tolerate intruders." Marcus nodded, knowing this might be their only chance to uncover the truth. That night, they slipped into the property, using information Marcus had gathered during his previous visits. The mansion was massive, almost labyrinthine, but they followed the clues Sophia had deduced from the messages. Finally, they found a hidden door behind a bookshelf in Victor's private library. The secret room was small, but packed with monitors, documents, and electronic devices. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized he was looking at the nerve center of Victor's operations. He began searching quickly, looking for anything that could incriminate him. That's when he found a file labeled with Eleanor's name. Inside were photographs, recordings, and detailed reports that left Marcus furious. The accident he had prevented hadn't been random. It had been orchestrated by men hired by Victor to silence Eleanor. She knew too much about her husband's illegal dealings and was about to expose everything. Marcus felt a mix of anger and guilt. He had saved Eleanor without realizing he was interfering in a much larger scheme. "This proves everything," Sophia whispered, flipping through another document detailing illegal transactions involving shell companies linked to Victor. "He's not just involved in crimes. He used you as part of his game." Marcus clenched his fists, fighting the urge to confront Victor immediately, but he knew he had to stay calm. "We need to take this to the authorities," he said, stuffing the documents into a folder. "But how do we get out of here without being caught?" Sophia pointed to a side window. "Through there are fewer cameras on that side of the house." They started moving, but before they could reach the exit, they heard heavy footsteps approaching. Victor was coming. Marcus and Sophia hid behind a desk, holding their breath as Victor entered the room. He looked furious, speaking into his phone in a low, threatening tone. "Find out who's messing with my files. I don't care what you do, just fix it now." When he hung up, he began checking the devices, clearly noticing that something was out of place. Marcus exchanged a tense glance with Sophia. They knew they had only seconds before being discovered. In a bold move, Marcus distracted Victor by throwing a chair against one of the screens, causing a short circuit. The sudden noise made Victor spin toward the commotion, giving Marcus and Sophia the chance to escape through the window. Back in the dormitory, Marcus examined the documents again, each page fueling his determination. He realized that Eleanor wasn't just an innocent victim. She was a crucial piece of the puzzle. If she could testify against Victor, they could bring down his entire criminal empire, but Marcus knew that protecting Eleanor and her baby would be dangerous. Victor had already tried to kill her once, and now that he knew Marcus was investigating, he wouldn't hesitate to try again. "We need to warn her," Marcus told Sophia. "She needs to know she's still in danger." Sophia agreed, but warned, "If Victor finds out we're helping Eleanor, he'll come after us too." In the days that followed, Marcus and Sophia worked tirelessly to devise a plan. They decided to split tasks. Sophia would go to Eleanor to ensure her safety, while Marcus would gather more evidence to present to the authorities. Every step they took seemed to bring them closer to danger, but Marcus felt there was no other choice. He had saved Eleanor once, and now he felt responsible for protecting her completely. As he organized the documents, Marcus noticed something that chilled him to the bone: a list of names. Among them was his own. Next to his name was a simple note: "Monitor and control." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. From the beginning, Victor had manipulated him, turning him into a pawn in his game. The pressure was mounting, but Marcus knew he couldn't back down. He thought about all the difficult moments he'd faced to get to this point: his simple life, the struggles with his mother, the decision to accept Victor's offer. Everything had led him here, and he wouldn't let Victor get away with it. With the documents in hand, Marcus sent anonymous copies to investigative journalists and lawyers. Specializing in corporate crimes, he knew exposing Victor publicly would be their best chance to ensure justice. But he also knew that, by doing so, he was putting his own life at risk. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with concern. Marcus nodded, his expression firm. There's no turning back now, let's finish this. Marcus was sitting in his dorm room, poring over the documents he had smuggled out of Victor's mansion when there was a sharp knock at the door. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. No one had announced a visit, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Slowly, he stood and opened the door to find Victor standing there, flanked by two imposing men in suits. Marcus's stomach tightened as Victor stepped inside, without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk," Victor said, his tone calm, but laced with menace. Marcus closed the door behind him, his mind racing. "What do you want?" he asked. Trying to keep his voice steady, Victor smirked, gesturing for his men to wait outside before turning back to Marcus. "You've been busy, haven't you? Snooping around where you don't belong." Victor's words hung in the air like a threat, but Marcus refused to back down. "I know what you've been doing, Victor," he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "And I'm not going to let you get away with it." Victor chuckled darkly, shaking his head as if amused by Marcus's defiance. "You think this is some kind of game? You're playing with forces you don't understand, boy. But I'm willing to make this easy for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook, scribbling a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. "Take this," Victor said, holding it out. "Walk away, and I'll make sure you and your mother live comfortably for the rest of your lives." Marcus stared at the check, his fists clenched at his sides. The offer was tempting, more money than he could ever dream of, but he knew accepting it would mean betraying everything he believed in. "I'm not for sale," he said finally, his voice cold. Victor's smile faltered, replaced by a look of barely contained fury. "You're making a mistake," Victor growled, stepping closer until they were nearly face to face. "If you cross me, I'll destroy everything you care about. Your mother, your friends, they'll all pay the price for your stupidity." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he forced himself to stand his ground. "You already tried that once," he shot back, his voice rising. "But I'm still here, and so is Eleanor. Whatever you do, I'll expose you. The world will know who you really are." Victor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Marcus thought he might strike him. Instead, he straightened up, smoothing his suit jacket with deliberate calm. "Fine," Victor said, his voice icy, "but don't say I didn't warn you." With that, he turned and left, his men following close behind. Marcus sank onto his bed, his hands trembling as the weight of the confrontation settled over him. Later, that evening, Sophia arrived at Marcus's dorm, her expression grim. "I heard about what happened," she said, closing the door behind her. "Victor came to see me too. He tried to bribe me into staying quiet." Marcus looked up, surprised. "What did you tell him?" Sophia crossed her arms, her jaw set in determination. "The same thing you did. I'm not backing down. But we need to be careful. He's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. Together, they began reviewing the evidence again, searching for anything they might have missed. They knew time was running out. Victor wouldn't hesitate to act if he felt cornered. "We need to get this information to someone who can stop him," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "But how do we do that without getting caught?" As they worked, Marcus noticed something new in the documents. A list of names, including several high-profile politicians and business leaders. It was clear that Victor's reach extended far beyond what they had initially suspected. "This isn't just about Victor anymore," Marcus murmured, his voice heavy with realization. "If we expose him, we'll be taking down some of the most powerful people in the country." Sophia nodded, her expression tense. "Which means we'll have enemies on all sides. We need to move quickly, but carefully." Just as she finished speaking, there was a loud crash from outside. Marcus rushed to the window and saw a group of men in dark clothing approaching the building. "They're here," he whispered, his heart pounding. Sophia grabbed the folder containing the evidence and shoved it into her bag. "We need to go, now." Without hesitation, Marcus and Sophia slipped out of the dorm through a side exit, narrowly avoiding the men who were now storming the building. They ran through the shadows, their footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. "Where do we go?" Sophia asked, her voice strained with panic. Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. "There's a safe house near the edge of town." Eleanor mentioned it once. "It's where she's been hiding." Sophia nodded, and they quickened their pace, weaving through alleys and abandoned streets to avoid detection. Every sound made them flinch. Every shadow seemed like a potential threat. When they finally reached the safe house, Marcus knocked on the door in a pattern Eleanor had described. After a tense moment, the door creaked open, revealing Eleanor herself, her face pale but resolute. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not safe." "We didn't have a choice," Marcus replied, stepping inside with Sophia close behind. "Victor knows we're onto him. He sent men after us." Eleanor's eyes widened in fear, but she quickly regained her composure. "Then we need to act fast. If he finds this place, none of us will be safe." Marcus nodded, spreading the documents across the table. "We have enough evidence to take him down, but we need to get it to the right people. Journalists, law enforcement, anyone who can help us expose him." Eleanor hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a flash drive. "This contains everything I've gathered over the years. Combine it with what you have and you'll have more than enough to destroy him." Marcus took the drive, his hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a glimmer of hope. As they worked to consolidate the evidence, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Victor's threats echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the danger they were in. "What happens if we fail?" Sophia asked quietly, breaking the silence. Marcus paused, considering her question. "Then we fight harder," he said finally, his voice resolute. "Victor thinks he can scare us into submission, but he's wrong. We've come too far to give up now." Sophia nodded, her expression softening. "You're stronger than I realized, Marcus. Stronger than any of us." Her words gave him strength, even as the reality of their situation weighed heavily on him. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and dangerously exposed, but Marcus refused to let fear dictate his actions. By the time they finished compiling the evidence, dawn was breaking, casting a pale light through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, who was cradling her swollen belly, protectively, and felt a surge of determination. "We're not letting him win," he said firmly, addressing both Sophia and Eleanor. "No matter what happens, we'll make sure the truth comes out." Eleanor nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." Before they could discuss their next move, the sound of tires screeching outside sent them scrambling for cover. "They've found us," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus grabbed the bag containing the evidence and ushered the women toward a hidden exit. "Go, I'll hold them off." Eleanor shook her head fiercely. "No, you've done enough. Let us handle this." Marcus hesitated, torn between protecting them and ensuring the evidence survived. In the end, they agreed to split up, each taking a different route to maximize their chances of escape. Marcus stood at the edge of the rooftop, the city sprawling beneath him like a glittering tapestry. Victor approached from the other side, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete surface. The tension between them was palpable. Each step Victor took, amplifying the weight of the confrontation. "You really think you can win this, Marcus?" Victor asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Marcus tightened his grip on the folder in his hand, the evidence that would bring Victor's empire crashing down. "It's not about winning," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "It's about doing what's right, something you wouldn't understand." Victor smirked, shaking his head as if amused by Marcus's naivety. "And what makes you so sure you're the hero of this story? You're just a pawn, Marcus, a poor kid who got in over his head." Victor's words stung, but Marcus refused to let them shake his resolve. "Maybe I started out as a pawn," Marcus admitted, taking a step closer. But I'm done playing your games. Eleanor told me everything. How you tried to kill her, how you've been using people for your own gain. It ends here." Victor's expression darkened, his calm facade slipping for the first time. "You think those papers mean anything? Do you honestly believe anyone will care? Money talks, Marcus, and I have enough of it to bury you and everyone you love." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he forced himself to stand firm. "Not this time," he said, his voice rising. "The truth is out there now. Journalists, authorities, they already have copies of everything. There's no way out for you, Victor." As they circled each other, the rooftop felt smaller, the air heavier with unspoken threats. Marcus's mind raced, weighing his options. He could hand the evidence directly to the authorities waiting below, ensuring Victor's arrest. But Eleanor and her baby were still in danger, hidden somewhere in the city, while Victor's men searched for them. If Marcus left now, there was no guarantee they'd be safe. Victor seemed to sense his hesitation. "What's it going to be, Marcus?" he taunted, spreading his arms wide. "Save the damsel in distress or save yourself? Either way, you lose." Marcus clenched his jaw, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You don't get to decide what I do," he shot back. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about making sure people like you can't hurt anyone else." The sound of distant sirens broke the tension, drawing both their attention. Marcus knew the authorities were closing in, but he also knew Victor wouldn't go quietly. "You've made your choice," Victor sneered, pulling a small device from his pocket. Marcus recognized it immediately, a remote trigger for explosives. "If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me," Victor declared, his voice cold and resolute. Marcus's heart sank as he realized the stakes had just escalated. He couldn't risk innocent lives, not even to see Victor brought to justice. "Let me help Eleanor and her baby," Marcus pleaded, his voice desperate. "You've already lost. Don't make this worse than it has to be." For a moment, Victor hesitated, his thumb hovering over the trigger. Then, with a cruel smile, he tossed the device aside. "Fine," he said, "but don't expect me to thank you." With Victor disarmed, Marcus wasted no time. He called Sophia, who had been coordinating with Eleanor's safe house, and arranged for her to escort Eleanor and the baby to safety. Meanwhile, he stayed behind to ensure Victor didn't escape. As the police stormed the rooftop, Marcus handed over the folder containing the evidence, his hands trembling with exhaustion and relief. Victor was handcuffed without resistance, his arrogance replaced by a grim acceptance of his fate. "This isn't over," Victor muttered as he was led away, his eyes locking onto Marcus with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. Marcus didn't respond. He simply watched as the man who had controlled so much of his life was taken into custody. Hours later, after the chaos had subsided, Eleanor appeared at the edge of the rooftop, her presence grounding Marcus in the aftermath of the confrontation. She looked exhausted but alive, her baby cradled protectively in her arms. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. Marcus shook his head, unsure of what to say. "I didn't do it for thanks," he replied finally. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Eleanor smiled faintly, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the necklace she had given him weeks earlier. "Do you remember this?" she asked, holding it up. Marcus nodded, confused. "You dropped it on purpose," he said, realization dawning. Eleanor confirmed his suspicion with a nod. "It was a test," she admitted. "A way to see if you were truly the kind of person I hoped you were, and you proved me right." Her words struck a chord deep within Marcus, forcing him to reflect on everything he had endured. He had faced betrayal, danger, and moral dilemmas, yet he had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. "I didn't know what I was getting into when I saved you that day," Marcus admitted, his voice tinged with both regret and pride. "But I don't regret it. Not for a second." Eleanor stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "You've given me and my child a chance at a better life, and you've reminded me that there's still good in this world." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by the weight of her gratitude. "I couldn't have done it alone," he said, glancing toward the horizon where the first light of dawn was breaking through the darkness. "Sophia, my mother, they all believed in me. That's what kept me going." As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light over the city, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the struggles, the sacrifices and the choices that had defined him. He had walked away from wealth and power, proving that his integrity was worth more than any material gain. Yet, as he stood there with Eleanor and her baby, he realized that his fight wasn't just for them. It was for everyone who had ever been silenced or oppressed by people like Victor. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked, breaking the silence. Marcus turned to her, his expression resolute. "Now, we rebuild together." His words carried a promise, not just to Eleanor but to himself, that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, he would continue fighting for justice and truth. In the days that followed, Marcus returned to his normal life, though nothing felt quite the same. The media hailed him as a hero, but he shied away from the attention, preferring to focus on the future rather than dwell on the past. He reconnected with his mother, who embraced him with tears of pride and began planning ways to use his newfound platform to help others. Sophia remained by his side, her unwavering support a constant source of strength. Together, they founded a program aimed at providing opportunities for underprivileged youth, inspired by Marcus's own journey. Though the scars of his battle with Victor would never fully fade, Marcus knew he had emerged stronger and more resilient. As he looked at the necklace Eleanor had returned to him, now resting safely in his pocket, he felt a sense of peace. It was a reminder not just of where he had been, but of the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Marcus stood at the entrance of the community center he had spent months building, watching as children laughed and played in the newly renovated courtyard. The sound of their joy filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had defined his life only weeks earlier. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and allowed himself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but standing here now, surrounded by the smiles of kids who reminded him so much of his younger self, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "You've done something incredible here," a familiar voice said from behind him. He turned to see Eleanor approaching, her baby cradled in her arms. She looked different, lighter, as if the weight of Victor's shadow had finally lifted. "It wasn't just me," Marcus replied, stepping aside to let her enter. "A lot of people helped make this happen." Eleanor smiled softly, her gaze drifting toward the children running around the courtyard. "Still, it was your vision. You could have walked away after everything you went through, but you didn't. That says a lot about who you are." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable. With the praise, "I just wanted to give these kids the kind of opportunities I never had. If even one of them finds a way out of the cycle because of this place, then it'll all be worth it." Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said after a pause. "Someone who believed in doing what was right, no matter the cost." Her words hung in the air, unspoken but heavy with meaning. Marcus didn't ask for clarification. He didn't need to. He knew she was talking about herself, and perhaps about the person she hoped her child would grow up to be. As they walked further into the center, Eleanor stopped in front of a mural painted on one of the walls. It depicted a tree with sprawling branches, each leaf bearing the name of a child enrolled in the program. At the base of the tree was an inscription, "Rooted in hope, reaching for dreams." Eleanor traced the words with her fingers, her eyes glistening. "This is beautiful," she murmured. "It's more than just a program. It's a promise." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "That's exactly what I wanted it to be. A reminder that no matter where you come from, you can still grow." Eleanor turned to face him, her gratitude evident in her expression. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything. You saved more than my life. You gave me hope when I thought there was none left." Her words struck a chord deep within him, forcing him to confront the full scope of what he had accomplished. He had started this journey wanting nothing more than to escape his circumstances, to prove himself in a world that seemed determined to hold him back. But somewhere along the way, his focus had shifted. It wasn't about personal success anymore. It was about creating change, about leaving a legacy that would outlast him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Marcus admitted, his voice tinged with emotion. "If you hadn't trusted me, if you hadn't tested me with that necklace, I might not have found the strength to stand up to Victor." Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out the delicate silver chain, holding it out to him. "It was always yours," she said simply. "I just needed to know it would end up in the right hands." Marcus took the necklace, its familiar weight grounding him in the present. He studied the intricate knot design, now imbued with new meaning. It wasn't just a symbol of mystery or unanswered questions. It was a reminder of the choices he had made, the lives he had touched, and the future he was helping to shape. "I think I understand it now," he said, glancing at Eleanor. "The knot. It's not just about being tied to the past. It's about connections between people, between actions and consequences. Everything we do leaves a mark." Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "Exactly. And the marks you've made will last far beyond anything Victor ever built." Her words resonated deeply, reinforcing the belief that his journey had always been about more than survival. It was about impact, about making the world a little better for those who came after him. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself reflecting on the sacrifices he had made and those he hadn't. He had walked away from wealth and power, choosing instead to return to the community that had shaped him. Some might have called it foolish, but Marcus knew it was the only path that made sense. His mother often told him that true success wasn't measured by how much you accumulated, but by how many lives you improved along the way. Looking around at the bustling center, he realized she had been right. The laughter of the children, the gratitude in Eleanor's eyes, the knowledge that he had played a part in breaking cycles of poverty and despair. It was worth more than any amount of money Victor could have offered. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Marcus sat on a bench near the mural. Eleanor joined him, her baby cooing softly in her arms. "What happens next for you?" Marcus asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Eleanor hesitated before answering, her gaze distant. "I'm starting over, somewhere, far away from all of this. A fresh beginning for both of us." Marcus nodded, understanding the need to leave the past behind. "You deserve it," he said sincerely. "And wherever you go, know that you'll always have a home here, with us." Eleanor smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you, Marcus, for giving me hope, for believing in me when no one else did." Her words echoed in his mind, a testament to the power of kindness and courage. In that moment, as the day faded into twilight, Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. The journey had been difficult, marked by danger, betrayal, and moments of doubt, but it had also been transformative, teaching him lessons about resilience, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what was right. As he watched Eleanor walk away, the necklace safely tucked into his pocket, he realized that his story wasn't just about overcoming adversity. It was about connection. Every choice he had made, every risk he had taken, had led him here, to a place where he could inspire others to dream bigger and reach higher. The collar, once a symbol of unanswered questions, now represented the completion of a circle, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could be found. By the time night fell, the center had grown quiet, the children gone and the staff preparing to close up for the evening. Marcus lingered, unwilling to leave just yet. He walked to the mural one last time, running his fingers over the names etched into the tree. Each one represented a life changed, a future rewritten. He thought about his own journey, The boy who had once dreamed of escaping his circumstances only to find purpose in staying and making a difference. The realization filled him with a quiet pride. He had faced giants and emerged victorious, not through brute force, but through determination and heart. As he stepped outside, the cool night air brushing against his skin, Marcus knew that his work was far from over. But for the first time in his life, he felt ready for whatever came next. After all, he had already proven that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, changing lives in ways he might never fully understand. Did this story bring back a special memory or spark a reflection for you? At Living Narratives, every detail is crafted with care to touch your heart and enrich your day. We pour our hearts into creating content that truly resonates with you because you are the reason we're here. If this video inspired you or moved you in any way, we'd love your support to keep this journey going. Subscribe to our channel and help us continue sharing meaningful stories like this one. A simple like means so much to us. It shows we're on the right path and motivates our team to keep creating with passion. And don't forget to explore our other videos. Each one has been made with the same dedication and purpose to connect with hearts like yours. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What did this story awaken in you? Your voice is an essential part of this community. Thank you for being a part of Living Narratives. It's a privilege to share these moments and emotions with you. Until the next chapter.